It's a little past 3:30, I apologize. We now have everybody, so we'll call this meeting to order. And I'll do a roll call. Joanna Daniels.
Here.
Erica Grammer.
Here.
Jim Holcomb.
Here.
Bear Key.
Here.
Debbie Martin.
Here.
Jackie Wilbur. Here. Kaylee Wilson.
Here.
And we have guests, but we also have Cecilia Maynard here from our Red Regional Library. And we have some of our library directors that are also here. Anita Lambert is here. Gabby Cato is here. Alicia Neighbors is here. See Alicia. I don't see Lauren. Okay, thank you. So those are our regulars, and then we have some other guests. So as we start our business, the first thing we need to do is approve our agenda. I will exercise a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Joanna Daniels makes a motion. Debbie Martin seconds. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So we'll move on to our public recognition part. We're going to ask that you hold it to 3 minutes. Jim Holcomb is going to be my timekeeper, and we'll let you have your full 3 minutes, but because we have quite a few on the list, we need to hold it down. So, just a second.
Good people, while here at the mic, you're here, I'm down here. I'll give you the one sign when you've got 1 minute left. That's insert joke here, but it just now seems inappropriate. So thanks.
And when I see the 1 minute sign, I'll try to keep my eye on Jim, so I know exactly when the time's up. Okay. Our first speaker is Jessica Norris, and we're going to ask that you say your name and where you're from.
Hello, I'm Jessica Norris. I live at 1041 Mansfield Farms Boulevard in Hendersonville. We need all vacant library board seats to be filled by competent individuals with no political agendas. Several qualified applicants were sadly ignored. Stacking the library board with extremists on any side is unacceptable. This is not true representation for the taxpayers of Sumner County. I've never gotten an email response to any of my questions from anyone on the library board. We need transparency. Instead, we are witnessing abuse of power by folks who want to control access to knowledge based on their religion and personal preferences. This policy is in response to an imaginary problem. I am a very protective parent and heavily screen all content my kids consume because that's my responsibility. I don't need anyone else policing what library books my kids can access for me. It is also ridiculous to vote on a policy that does not list any procedures for its implementation or cost to taxpayers. Even if you're in favor of removing or segregating some of the books impacted by this policy, it's a slippery slope. It can only be enforced with subjective interpretation. The scope of potential books that could be impacted is incredibly wide, not to mention censored books for adults because minors have access to the library is a violation of First Amendment rights and will invite lawsuits. The silver lining is that more voters are paying attention to the damage commissioners who belong to political interest hate groups are causing. This is just one of many examples that will help wake voters up and hopefully drive turnout. I want to thank our librarians for their years of experience in ensuring their collections are appropriate, comply with current laws, and for providing services and collections that meet the needs of all families. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Frances Gary.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm Frances Gary. I live at 1112 Maple View Trail in Hendersonville. I've lived here since 1988 and I've raised 3 sons accessing the library probably at least weekly. I have 28 years of service as a teacher in Tennessee schools, 24 of those in Sumner County. I was Merrill High Teacher of the Year and Sumner County Teacher of the Year. I've served as a librarian in 2 different counties, and I've trained teachers throughout the state. I'm currently a Friends of the Library Board member in Hendersonville. All I want to hear today is that you do not take away the rights of parents to choose books appropriate for their children. Last night in my own home, this book was being read to my grandchildren by my son because it teaches them not to allow marijuana to be used as a gateway drug that would lead to methamphetamine use. This father wrote this book because his son was on drugs. This book might be banned in this library and unavailable to my family to serve their children well and to keep them safe with this policy in place. In my 28-year career, I never once had parents say that their child accessed a book in their public libraries that was inappropriate. And during the years as a teacher, I knew I was reinforced daily that I could never take the place of the parent's role. I was the teacher's facilitator, but it was their choice how they chose to raise their children. While I taught at Merrill High, we had lots of children who would read books above the level that you might recommend them to read, but that was still appropriate for them. Just like some 17-year-old might want to go read Stephen King, and if their parents lets them read that book, that's their choice. It is not your choice. It is not the librarian's choice to do that. The way your policy is written, only one person gets to make the decision of what books are in the library, and that's one librarian. That is not a good policy. It will not hold up, I believe, in a court of law. I think that you are opening yourselves to lawsuits that will be tremendous expense to the county. This kind of policy was already fought in Texas. When they were trying to implement something like this, they lost, and just the motion part alone was $50,000. That was in 2002. That part probably would be a six-figure sum today, and that is taxpayer money that we would be losing. This decision is big government at worst. You're taking away the parents' right to decide what their child can read and have access to. It will take an enormous staff to rearrange, discard, and monitor every book. Who would pay for this change? We, the citizens, the community. And yet your policy says only one person is responsible, our local librarians. It's an impossible task. Your timing also, this meeting could not be worse. 3:30 on the day before Thanksgiving, I left 5 visiting grandchildren in my house. Thank you.
In order to save time and give everybody a chance to speak, let's just let one person speak after another, okay? The next speaker is Cale Morrison. Morrison? Am I not saying that correctly? Cale? Okay, we'll go. The next one is Angie Morrison. It looks like M-A-R-I-S-H.
Is it Cole Harrison and Angie Harrison?
Harrison, yes. Okay, Cole Harrison.
My husband is parking the car. May I refer?
Yes, and we'll swap.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for hearing me today. As others have mentioned, it is very rough timing. But here we are, somewhere between the dirty diapers and the cranberry sauce. I'm working on trying to persuade you guys that this is a really good policy to enact. And it's also vitally necessary to the safety and trustworthiness of our libraries. And contrary to what the prior speaker said, it's not a legal issue because you actually have a policy already in place. I mentioned this last time, that there is a policy against sexually explicit material in the libraries. Sex acts cannot be viewed on library computers. Playboy is not among the periodicals, although I'm sure plenty of people say that they read it for the quality writing. So why then can pornography be included in the written collection? And to be clear, we're not just talking about written pornographic material. We're talking about graphic novels that depict things that I will not mention here given the company that we have. And praise God, there is this company here because I would have to give examples of how we're not talking about HBO level softcore material. We're talking about really intense graphic material. So I find it astounding that educators would be persuaded to come here today in the name of censorship and free speech and all of these wonderful things, when in fact, we're not talking about quality literature of any variety, but extremely lewd, extremely inappropriate material. And here's the kicker. Adults wrote this stuff. And they mostly wrote it for children. And by children, I mean the 13-year-olds, the 14-year-olds, the 15-year-olds, sometimes the younger. And I mean, it's mind-boggling, really, when you think about it. And we all should be lighting fires under the publishers for this kind of material and calling out their profiting from this predatory garbage. But today, this is the front that we're fighting, and we're asking you to please help make the library a safe place where parents can drop their kids off after school or have them stay at the library for a few hours after school and go read some reasonably safe material. They're going to get all sorts of ideas from material in the books, and we're going to have to counter as parents. But it does not need to be over explicit sex between adults and children in these books. Please, please approve this. There's a policy up front that says if there's tobacco in it, it's not allowed here. We're not saying it can't exist anywhere. We're saying don't bring it to the library, don't spend our tax dollars on it. Thank you.
We're trying to set time, so Cal Harrison is next, and I did not get your address or where you're from.
Hello, my name is Cole Harrison. It's unfortunate that we are having to deal with this issue, but here we are. This is merely a push back against the onslaught of the sexualization of children that has been raging, increasing each decade. Hollywood, media producers, politicians, school unions, and those who desire to capture the minds and hearts of children for their own imagined utopian future have endorsed and promoted this into society. This is not surprising, seeing that the elite cater to the perverted tastes of some people by offering the powerful elite trips to Pedophilia Island where they partake in vile acts, and they are protected. Now we, the parents, are having to push back. We talk about free speech, but what does that truly mean? Anyone has access to a laptop where they can write anything they want. There exist books that teach pedophiles how to lure and trick children into sexual play. People have the freedom to look up this at their home on their computer, but would we allow this into the public library? Of course not. At 9 years old, I found a box of pornographic magazines in the back alley near my house. It was intense subject matter for my young brain. I became addicted to the rush and then sought after more adult experiences after that. I became addicted to drugs and alcohol, dropped out of school in the 9th grade, and almost lost my life at 18 years old. If it wasn't for the love of God, I wouldn't be here today. I know this is an extreme example, but looking back, it would have been nice not to have found that pornography in the first place. It would have been nice if my innocent childhood would have been protected, and it would be a shame if the library was the place where kids found written porn. So today we're talking about the protection of children, but the real question today is, what do you want society to be like? I moved to Tennessee about 3 years ago. We live near San Francisco, California. Every year in San Francisco, there is the Folsom Street Fair. At this public event for the citizenry, you will witness people giving men oral sex, people having anal sex, people whipping each other in leather bondage gear naked, all openly in the public street. Many San Francisco citizens love it and bring their own children to this event. They were practicing free speech, I guess, but here's a question. Do you want the flavor of society for your children to be like that? For your grandchildren? You think it can't happen here. You're wrong. It's coming if we don't stand against it. Today is just a small measure of pushback against a huge wave. I support the protection of children. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tony Stockton.
Thank you. My name is Tonyston. I live at 445 Cummings Lane, Gallatin, Tennessee. I am here on behalf of the youth in our community. I'd like for you to recall what our libraries used to be like. Our libraries were originally intended to be a place with rich, beautiful literature, a place of safe and healthy learning. I used to look forward to going to the library as a child. And now as a homeschool mom and a homeschool family, we have logged many hours at our local library and absolutely adored our librarian, Miss Chris. I wish she could have been here today. That was until she felt the need to resign because of the progressive direction that our libraries were turning. Her and I both witnessed healthy, wholesome classic books being pulled from library shelves while noticing more questionable, explicit material coming in their place. The change had definitely begun. That was the moment that I started to keep a pulse on what was happening with the American Library Association. Again, our libraries were initially created to provide a healthy and safe atmosphere and work to provide clean literature for all people. Not just any book belongs. The origin of libraries was never intended to be a place that inhibits dark, perverse, sexual material or pornography in ink. By the way, this is not a First Amendment. Nor are libraries created for certain people to frequent to quench their sexual perverted fantasies and or fetishes found in perverse pornographic reading. This is not what local libraries were created for. Again, the library was intended to the library was not intended to house or distribute pornographic material, period. I find it worth noting that this is why there are adult bookstores on the corner with XXX rated. There's a reason for that. Because they carry the sexual perversion and pornography in books, and libraries at one time adamantly rejected that, but not anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a civic and moral responsibility as adults and leaders to guard and protect the innocence of the minds and the atmosphere of our local libraries as a whole. We are the watchmen and the gatekeepers for the children in this generation. Laws are important. Certain policy is very important. It shapes and protects a community, state, and a nation, and ultimately brings prosperity. When there is no accountability through policy on certain content that can cause serious emotional and psychological damage to our youth and our libraries, then we have failed our youth and we have failed our community. This policy, if passed, will protect our children from sexual perversion that is being peddled into our Sumner County libraries. And most importantly, it will bring accountability to the progressive and over-sexual ideology that the American Library Association as a whole is pushing throughout our country. If all this sounds too emotionally supercharged for you, then let me remind you that the American Library Association launched a national drag queen story hour that would allow men dressed as sexual caricatures of women reading age-inappropriate books, confusing books to toddlers in libraries. Accountability and policy is important. Please pass this policy.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Clyde.
I'm Clyde, 1040 Kenders Run. I come today just to simply add my support to this amendment, to this resolution, whatever you want to call it. I will say this, I don't have a written statement, but I will tell you, you are the gatekeepers to our children. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with limiting what a child brings into their home, into their mind. It is our responsibility as parents. That's laying aside our religious beliefs, all those things. We have a responsibility to protect our children's minds. And to say that this is a First Amendment infraction or that it works against that doesn't work in my mind, simply because you're not taking it away from others, you're taking it away from minors and making sure it's not in their hands. So I would tell you today, from the people in my circle of influence, that we 100% support this and we have to do something. I encourage you guys, please be the gatekeepers that we've elected all of you to be and take care of our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sherlock Singh.
My name is Sherlock Singh. I live at 159 Enoch Way, Gallatin. I moved here to Tennessee in 2008. And I was excited to know that this is the Bible Belt. I'm not sure we can call it the Bible Belt now with the invasion of perversion that's so prevalent all the way around. And now we are trying to infiltrate the minds of the children, our future leader. And I will battle this as much as I can. But remember this, from age birth to age 12, which is a scientific study that shows the mind of the child is molded. We want criminals, then let's allow these perversion to come in. If we want people that will be upright citizens to lead this nation, then let us evict the perversion and let us allow God to come in. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alice Dowlett.
Hello, my name is Alice Dowlett. I live at 199 Albright Farms Drive here in Gallatin. When I was young, I was exposed to a book called The Joy of Sex, and that was the day that innocence was taken, and the day that Pandora's box was opened, a source of great and unexpected troubles. Books are an incredible source of knowledge. They hold the power to unleash imagination. Some knowledge is detrimental, and some imaginations are evil. God has given us adults the responsibility to protect the innocent, to protect the children. This should not even be a debating issue. The only reason we are here is because our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world. I can't read the rest of my tears. The spiritual forces of evil, thank you, in the heavenly realms. We come against every demonic agenda that is in this place, that is on Sumner County. We declare the blood of Jesus over the situation, and we say, no, Satan, you cannot have our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Stephen Puckett.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Puckett. I reside at 228 Sumner Ferry Road, apartment 821 in Hendersonville, Tennessee. And I am not thrilled to be here right now. Not just because I have to work overnight, but because this is the latest effort to do something to try to ban something that should not, or attack something that should not be attacked. And unfortunately, it began with the subjectification at the state level of the term obscenity, which is problematic, is about to fall due to a lawsuit in Wilson County. Ironically, the people who push for the change are about to take out their own change. The policy you have, thank goodness no Tiger Cub apparently has done any research on library policy right now, because I'm sure their daddy, as soon as they asked him what is this, would be calling the board asking, why did you put the Kama Sutra in the public record? So that's a major problem. There's other ways to present those kind of issues. Another issue with this is that it actually violates the child neglect provision of TCA 3915-401 by impairing their welfare and their health, by concealing information necessary for their self-defense, and to recognize that they are being sexually abused. Many kids do not find out they're being sexually abused until they pick up a book in the library and find out that what's being done to them is sexual and wrong. Another issue with this is the segregation, that the loose language on the segregation that is going to be followed up on. The problem is you create the opportunity for child abduction by by forcing parents to be separated from their children. The last issue that is that it's so overly broad, it impacts a particular book. And if the chair will allow me, I'd like to see how everybody feels about this book. It pretends, because it includes a story that involves the incestuous sexual exploitation of an elder by his two daughters. It involves alcohol. It is not overly graphic. So just show of hands, who thinks that should be banned from our library? That's good. Because the book I'm referencing is the Holy Bible. And the story I was referencing is the story of Lot. So I'm glad people know the word. But the thing is, this can be impacted. This book will be impacted by this. We have to make it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Julia Garnett. You can correct me there.
Hi, I'm Julia Garnett, 115 Deerage Lane, Hendersonville. I attend Hendersonville High School, and I'm here to speak on the proposed collection policy for Sumner County libraries. I would like to begin by quoting one of your very own board members at a school board meeting speaking about a book that she wanted banned from our school libraries. She said, "If you want to take this book and go put it into the public library, fine. Absolutely," end quote. But clearly, this was not fine, because here we are talking about a policy that will demand for the removal of books from our public libraries. A policy which is unconstitutional and will restrict young people's right to read. In fact, for a board who seems to be so patriotic, this policy seems pretty un-American. For people who value freedom, this policy seems to go against the very principles of a democratic society. And something tells me you already know this, because why else would you be here having this meeting the day before Thanksgiving, knowing that many wouldn't be able to attend to see you discuss such an inherently undemocratic and fascist policy? And I know that we have different values and morals and beliefs, and censorship certainly isn't my style, but I hope that we can all agree that protecting children is important. Because as a student and a leader, I certainly recognize this. I recognize that a gun is infinitely more dangerous than a book. I recognize that mental health is valid. I know that making sure that our queer kids are able to grow up to be queer adults is important. I recognize that families and students in Sumner County are diverse and deserve books to match this. I recognize the importance of trusting our librarians to do their jobs. And finally, I recognize that this policy will not protect minors, but instead take away access to books that reflect the things they have experienced or have questions about. And I'm sorry, but the sex education in schools across the state is already abysmal. The whole scare tactic of don't do it until you're married, here are all these scary pictures, isn't realistic for many teens. And without inclusive education, so many queer teens are left unsupported by the system. Reflecting the same in your library policy won't force abstinence or protect teens from reality, but it will create uninformed adolescents without resources. So no, actually, I'm not sorry for bringing to your attention that your policy will do the opposite of protecting children, but instead be used to remove books portraying queer characters, mental health and suicide, the horror racism, and ultimately end book leave to be, quote, obscene. All using a policy written for pornography, which is not actually applicable to the books it will be used to restrict. Finally, I would like to ask this board if you have considered the legal repercussions of this policy, because I would hate for taxpayers' money to go to waste on a lawsuit stemming from such a blatant violation of First Amendment rights by this board. With that said, representation saves lives. Please vote against this policy. Thank you.
Patricia Smith.
Thank you. My name is Patricia Smith. I live at 112 England Place in Hendersonville. I talked to you the last time that we met about the same thing. I would like to reference, though, the empty library board seats that have not been filled for quite some time. I would like to encourage this board to make sure that the procedure, and the applications are on the website. So we can find them. I'd love to apply for a seat. I know other people who would too. I am a former educator. I'm retired from another state. I've done just about every job you can imagine, even fired a coal furnace. So I'm old, yeah. And I am going to speak against the collections policy, like I did before, because it's overly broad. A lot of the other things that other people have said. This will result in lawsuits, probably multiple lawsuits. It will cost the taxpayers money if you pass this. Currently, there are lawsuits and temporary injunctions to keep these kinds of policies from being implemented. Don't think it won't happen to you, because it will. And I would also like to say, as I told you my background, I'm a Christian. I go to church all the time. I've been a Christian my entire life. And I want parents to be able to choose for their own children what books and what materials that they can access. I don't want big government. I don't want just a few people with just a very limited scope and viewpoint to be able to make all the decisions. And I would like for you to reject this policy, this collections policy. And in the 10 Senate Committee, let's do it again. I'd be happy to help. I've written lots of policies. Instead, I think you're trying to control. I don't want to see that. And I want to thank you very much for allowing all of us this time. And please fill the rest of your seats. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Taylor Johnson.
Taylor Johnson, I live at 111 Maureen Drive in Hendersonville. Based on the proposed policy, this body's definitions of obscenity and pornography are not linked to the criteria set out by Supreme Court cases Miller versus California in 1973, nor Ginsburg versus New York in 1968. It ignores the legal precedent that community standards referenced in the Miller test and the harmful to minors test is based upon the intake of the actual community, rather than the personal opinions of what those standards should be. This is clear with the very specific language in this proposed policy. If the books targeted by this policy already broke any state or federal laws, this language would not be needed. I hold a Master's of Science in Information Science from UT Knoxville, which was ranked number 10 as a library science program in the nation by U.S. News this year. My first class was collection development, and the very first step in developing a collection is to study the community. Library staff considers the community as a whole. They look at the majority and the minority groups of those that may use their resources. Librarians consider the languages spoken in the community, the ideologies, the sexual orientation, the family dynamics, the ages, and the interest groups within the community. Upon those factors, libraries develop their collection. Public libraries do not, however, develop their collections upon the whims of current local politics. If this body thought like public librarians, it would look at what our community standards actually are, rather than what they think they ought to be. It would look at the collection circulation data, particularly of the books considered for removal, to avoid censorship. It would look at sales data of local bookstores. It would look at ratings of films at our local movie theaters. In short, the Public Library Board would aim to reflect the community rather than to shape it by censoring books it personally disapproves of. I ask this body to serve the public, as librarians would do, rather than serve themselves and their own agendas. Do the work, serve the entire community, and not just those who look and think like you.
Our next speaker is Jill Fernandez.
Hey, happy Thanksgiving, Jill Cornelius. I live in Hendersonville.
circle. My request to you today is to vote no on the collection policy as written, vote no on the authoritative evaluation policy, and vote no on lowering the number of board seats. The shortened rationale for my recommendation comes down to a lack of trust in the board's ability to write policy, understand law, to be transparent, to protect its library directors, and the respective legal and financial risks posed on us as residents associated with these responsibilities. I do support a collection and reconsideration policy when it's thoughtful, accurately applies laws, and is prepared in collaboration with a diverse group of librarians. This specific version does none of these and cherry picks certain codes written for obscene visuals and misapplies them to non-visual publications without taking into account over 100 years of legal precedents. On page 3, you call this your obligation, but this is in actuality illegitimately forcing the personal views of a few onto a broader community under misleading intent. First, the harmful content is not in our libraries, as obscene material is illegal, and has been regulated as far back as the Comstock laws, which was a wholesale suppression of sexually explicit material, even the mention of birth control. Through subsequent Supreme Court decisions, obscenity laws have evolved away from outright suppression, rejecting the previous puritanical application, and now excludes work with literary, artistic, political, and scientific value. Even in cases when there is recurrent emergence of the theme of sex, there is legal precedent disallowing suppression of works solely for isolated passages. This collection policy ignores all of that and is a legal risk. Second, this policy ignores that parental consent is still required to use the library for all minors, including checking out the material as well as to use the internet. So the solution for those of us that don't want our minors exposed to something is then quite simple: supervise them. This policy vaguely defines its restriction of suppressed material in areas open to minors, which may not only further infringe on our rights, but poses additional ADA compliance complications. How much money does the Commission want to spend to enforce this? Lastly, if lack of knowledge of First Amendment protections in the proposed policy wasn't justification enough as to why we need all 11 seats filled, the proposed valuation policy is further confirmation. Such a derogatory valuation policy could easily be used to harass and bully. Given the majority of this board is not even responsive to the members of the community that reach out, and even themselves are known to bully others, the culture we've seen this past year and what's being proposed here is dangerous. I implore members of this board to vote no, not to avoid establishing policy, but vote no to say this isn't the right policy. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Catherine Lanzer.
I'm Catherine Langford, and I resided at 1325 Britain Ranch Road in Gallatin for 38 years. I wanted to speak today to request you to rethink the possible changes in the policy for protecting children from harmful, sexually explicit material on the library. But first, let me tell you a little about myself. I had my master's degree and I'm a reading specialist. I worked 28 years at an elementary school here in Gallatin. I was raised in a small town where I could go to the library on my own. Once I was 10 years old. I could not wait for Saturday's coming, so after watching cartoons, I would go to the library. I like to think I read most everything in the youth and teen section. I sometimes would peruse the National Geographic magazines. That is when my small town rose-colored glasses came off. I was introduced to various cultures. I was curious to see why some cultures did not wear as many clothes as the people I knew. I was also exposed to all kinds of arts, even potentially risque art. Then, around 10, having exhausted reading Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, the Wizard of Oz collections, I snuck upstairs and found a whole new world waiting for me. Once in a book about a girl that was murdered, I read how cruel life can be sometimes. What I read would violate the policy that you're trying to make. Was it pornography? No. Because even though it contained explicit description of a sexual activity, it did not stimulate me erotically, which is the main definition of pornography. What it did was provide me with an emotional feeling. Did it harm me? No. I can honestly say that it did leave me impacted on my life. It was an impact that I carried into adulthood, an impact that made me empathetic to my students and the life they live. an impact that helped me work with children and let them know everyone is different and special. It was an impact that helped me recognize the need for some children to read about life, the good, the bad, the ugly. Just remember the depiction of erotic behavior is not, or the description of pornography is erotic behavior that is explicitly intended to cause sexual excitement. And I don't think there's anything in any of our libraries that does that. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Linda Herrera.
Hi, I live in Hendersonville. My name is Linda Herrera, and I'm a single parent for children. And when my children were growing up, I used to take them to the library because it was a safe place and they were entertained, they could get entertained there. And I got my GED there. I value the public libraries, and I feel that it should be a safe place for all ages. I'm in favor of this new policy that will protect minors from books with sexual materials in them. A parent cannot be in all places at all times, so ensuring that the public library is a safe place will be a very comforting to parents. Parents have so many battles with social media and online materials that the public library should not be another battlefield. Please pass this policy and make sure that our tax dollars create a space that is safe for minors. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rick Graham.
My name is Rick Grimm. I live at 475 A.B. Wade Road in Portland. And we're here the day before Thanksgiving, aren't we? And I'm proud to see you all here. That's great. Many of us are out doing all kinds of things for the holidays, yet we're before the board here trying to figure out what's going on. They're going to vote on a very important items, I should say, that will have a lasting impact on our library system and the community itself. One item that is to be amended and voted on today are the bylaws. Why all of a sudden do we need to change the bylaws? The bylaws were just changed in June the 11th of this year. And at our last meeting, just 14 days ago, board members stood up and wanted to add that to the agenda to vote on having 9 members of the board instead of 11. Just 14 days ago. But why the rush? That's my question. The current bylaws provide for a bylaws committee. And my question is, was the item that was brought up last month, 2 weeks ago, even brought before the bylaws committee? I had no idea. It was just brought up that that's what they wanted to do. So the board agreed to put it on today's agenda, and here we are. Why change from 9 people to 11 board members? There are currently 206,973 residents in Sumner County, represented by 25 board commissioners. Yet, here the board has an item before them today. They want to change and reduce us down to 9 instead of 11. What I'm asking today is vote no on the amendment of the bylaws and provide Sumner County residents with a full representation we and they deserve. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Timothy Keith.
Thank you, Board, for the opportunity to speak, and also thank you, fellow citizens, for coming out and practicing your First Amendment rights with peacefully assembling. I would like to say a quote from a great American, a great inventor, a great diplomat, and also a founding father of our nation, Benjamin Franklin. This was reference to the material, printing material, newspapers, etc., within his time, within the Pennsylvania Gazette on June 10, 1731. If all printers were determined not to print anything until they were sure it would not offend anyone, there would be very little printed. That applies today. Think about it. And depending on what the society thinks is important during that point in time, or what they feel is inappropriate material, then anything could be banned in our books, in our schools, in our libraries, no matter where it is. It depends on what people's opinion is at that point in time. Even the Bible itself could be banned by someone because they think it's not appropriate, or to make it rewrite it, to remove content that the gentleman spoke about earlier. We don't have the right as parents of other parents to say what their kids can read. The government doesn't have a right to say what our kids can read. That's the responsibility of the parents. Benjamin Franklin actually had his biography banned during that time frame because of the content. The founding father of our country, one of the main reasons that we got our independence was banned because of content that somebody felt was inappropriate. Benjamin Franklin. We as a country, we as citizens, need to be putting more time and focus around critical thinking and figuring out what's appropriate from information that we're getting online and what we're getting through different methods. Artificial intelligence itself is copying people's voices and copying people's images to where somebody may not necessarily know what's real or not. But if you're not able to spend your time critically thinking of what's really true or not based on the content you have, and not being restricted by another parent or by the government, then we are going to fail as a nation. We have to be able to think for ourselves and not have somebody else tell us what we can read or not. Otherwise, we lose our freedom as Americans. We must have the content available to read, and we must have the ability to know what's true or not based on the knowledge we have. That's the government's role, is to ensure that we're informed and that we have the knowledge to tell what's right or not. If we don't do that, we are going to fail as a country. And we must stop fighting each other over things like this and stand together and figure out how we can grow the country and beat false information. All right, thank you.
Our next speaker is Yusa Hayward.
That's Lisa. Lisa Hayward. Close though.
Even with my glasses on.
And that's okay. I am in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and I did not come here with a political agenda. I don't represent any particular group. So why am I here? I am a taxpayer resident of Sumner County. I'm a parent who used to take their kids to the library every Saturday for them to pick out books and not have to be concerned with what material was in them. I hope someday to be a future grandmother and do the same thing with my grandkids. I still have one minor son at home, and I have friends with several young children of their own. So what I wanted really to focus on is what the policy is. It was written and approved under advisement of legal counsel. It follows all state laws currently enacted. It has to be written in a way that defines exactly what sexually explicit material is, which is in of itself graphic. However, if it's not clearly defined what sexually explicit material is, then it's up for interpretation. And we all know that everybody's interpretation of something is very different. So this puts it in terms of black and white and not a gray area. Library associations on a national level are painting a very broad stroke of what is contained in our public libraries. We do have the legal power and authority on a state and local level to enact policy that protects our children. So what is the policy, we talked about what the policy is, let's talk about what it is not. It is not book banning. Denying access to certain books to young children and minors is not banning. It's just denying that access to them at that age. It is not censorship. The public library is not the place for sexually explicit materials as contained in books, period. So I'm asking the library board to vote yes to this policy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker, John Creasy.
I'm John Creasy, and I live at 397 Henry Harris Road, Westmoreland. Concerning the proposed revision of the library policy, by no means do I profess to be an expert on constitutional law, but I would suspect a new policy must be aligned with state law and infused with language that passes constitutional muster, as such matters will ultimately guide the final outcome of any decision made here this evening. The rationale behind the policy and the language contained within cannot be written in such a way as to deny inherent rights that are guaranteed by the Constitution. As the proposed policy is currently written, the language is vague and could be construed as overreach. Fervent beliefs inform both sides of this debate, and both sides will make passionate, often emotionally charged arguments of merit. However, a government policy applicable to a wide array of citizenry cannot be written through the lens of emotionalism. The courts have repeatedly upheld the fundamental right to receive information and ideas. While we can all cite certain isolated passages within books we may personally find repulsive, vulgar, and offensive, the state of Tennessee, guided by the Supreme Court of the United States, gives a clear legal definition of what constitutes obscenity. To codify the proposed policy as currently written could lead to the removal of a great number of titles caught up in this blanket from our public libraries, and runs the real possibility of landing the county in court, and the courts will have no respect for fervent emotionalism offered by either side. I would suggest a studied review of the language used in the existing policies offered at the last meeting by your regional liaison. Finally, in regards to the possibility of decreasing the number of county library board members, every community with a library needs at least one representative on this board. In the spring, I was made aware that my town, Westmoreland, was without representation. As an educator with almost 40 years' experience, a published writer, and a lifetime of service to my community, I offered to volunteer my service or my time to serve on the board. Twice since March, I have submitted my name for consideration to serve, and would love the opportunity to work with you in the support and oversight of our libraries. I applaud any members of your board who have visited our small library in Westmoreland. Well over 30 years ago, I was vice chairman of the Friends of the Westmoreland Library when it was actually housed in a small corner store on Park Street, and later when it was housed in a part of our local VFW hall. I filled in at times for its sole employee, Ms. Willie Ruth Borders. Eventually, a group of citizens, of which my wife and I were a part, helped raise funds to construct a new library. After a lot of hard work by that core group of citizens, I was honored to give the dedication speech to a large crowd when we finally had a building of our own. Still small, but we had a building of our own. I went on to serve as chairman of the Friends of the Library from 1989 to 1994. If you believe there's no interest in serving on this board, you've chosen to bury your head in the sand. The downsizing of this board is not a good move, and my town deserves a seat at the table. I also want to say happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Thank you.
The next speaker, Emily Goddard.
My name is Emily Goddard. I live at 245C South Leaf Road in Portland. Hello and happy Thanksgiving. I'm here to voice my opposition to the proposed changes to the collections development and management policy, and also fill the empty seats. I'm hearing that, and I need to pay more attention, but I know Mr. Creasy, and yes, every community needs representation. But I'm here to voice my opposition to the proposed changes. I understand that the policy was likely born of good intentions. However, there are too many unknowns that would hamper implementation and enforcement, such as what protections are in place for librarians. I know lots of librarians across our county, in the schools, and in public libraries, and they are wonderful people who love books and connecting people to information, books, and reading, but none of them are perfect, just as none of us are. They cannot be expected to curate and maintain a library full of multimedia materials, computers with internet access, programming, and other community events, while also monitoring who is in the adults-only section of the library. Who incurs the cost that this policy will definitely create? Recently, a similar situation arose in a public library in an Indianapolis suburb, according to NBCNews.com, and its estimated costs are over $330,000 and approximately 8,000 hours to complete. This library has around 18,000 items in the children's and teens sections to review. I cannot fathom the number of items in all of Sumner County's libraries. What about books that may flag incorrectly? This happened in Alabama just last month to a children's book because the author's last name was gay. This was reported on multiple news outlets, AP, Sky News, NBC, and The Independent, to name a few. Where does it stop? Will all books be held to this standard that's intended to protect children? It feels like we could be entering a slippery slope with this policy that could place our county squarely in violation of the First Amendment. According to the CDC's website, the teen birth rate in Tennessee in 2021 was 21.5%, seventh highest in the nation. Children and teens will find out about sex and sex acts despite our best efforts. It likely won't come from a book either, within the information age, and any children that don't have a Wi-Fi enabled device are likely in close proximity to someone who does, and they're around other kids. Think about your own childhood. You were likely exposed to some type of life lesson much younger than your parents would have liked because of your relationships with other children and teens. Kids need to be able to see themselves in novels, print materials, and other media. I have worked in both K-12 and higher ed my entire adult life. Prior to my professional career, I worked in preschools, kids camps, and as an aide. Believe me when I say that lots of kids raise themselves or have less than ideal home lives. Libraries can be seen as an escape, as well as a place to seek information safely. The quote from Pastor Martin Niemöller has stuck with me since high school when I saw it at National Holocaust Museum. In Germany, first they came for the socialists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a socialist.
Thank you.
And then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the Unionists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Unionist. And they came for the Catholics, and I didn't speak up because I was a Protestant. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up. So thank you for my opportunity to speak up for those who can't or won't today.
Our next speaker, Cole Shepherd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sharon H. We've heard a lot today on both sides of this, and I'm not going to rehash all that. What I would like to focus on here is how we got here. First of all, this board, this current board, was mostly handpicked by one individual. And people on the board know this, but I'm reciting this for the people in the room who may not be aware, and the people who will watch this online, basically the citizens of the county. One county commissioner has hand-selected most of these board members. One county commissioner, the same county commissioner, is also refusing to let other citizens of this county be considered for this board. This county commissioner stood up in a school board meeting and gave an impassioned speech to ban a book about a black child. This speech was about 95% fact-free. So that is who is controlling your school board. I'm sorry, your library board. Now, let's talk about the library board. The person that is pushing this policy, the board member that's pushing this policy on collections development and pushing the board to be moved from 11 to 9 people, also gave an impassioned speech in front of the school board to ban a book about a black or brown child, and showed an astounding lack of awareness on how a book is published. Very little awareness of how publishing works. So that is who is The citizens of this county need to know that is who's pushing it. So, we've heard a lot today, and I'm not going to rehash it all, but a lot of the comments made pro this policy were evidence-free. I have not seen a book in our library system that is pornographic. I have not seen a book in our library system that is obscene. So if parents have that problem or have that issue, well, first of all, supervise your child. Second, bring those to the public. Let's see them. That's all I have to say. I just think the public needs to know where this is coming from. Thank you.
Parker, I'm sorry.
My name's Tracy Parker. I live at 1110 Woodwell Drive in Gallatin for the last 18 years. I've lived in Gallatin since 1995. I've also been a teacher in Gallatin since 1995 and a school librarian for 25 years. My kids accessed the public library a good bit when they were younger. In fact, I taught the little ABC toddler program for a while because I had somebody resign unexpectedly. And I just like this gentleman here. I would really like to know what the problem is, because the problem that's brought up is not a problem that I have seen in my public library or my school library. It is my objective in my school library to find materials that are reflective of my population and that are age appropriate for them. And as so many of these other people have brought out, this is a slippery slope. This is an invitation to begin questioning everything that doesn't line up with certain people's values. And that's not good. Emily's poem, I was going to say as well, because we have to speak up for that. I may not agree with you, and you may not agree with me, and that's okay. But I need to be able to read a variety of viewpoints, and I can tell you as a person who has read an inordinate amount of young adult literature, it is not there to sexually stimulate them. It's not. It is a cautionary tale of why your mama told you you didn't need to be doing this to start with. And they're going to learn about it in a variety of places, and I have always found it to be true from the time I was in middle school, reading books that were above me, to now the books that I read. That are young adult books. They are there to present what could happen in a good or bad way. And most of the time it's just informative. It's not judgy. A kid can read it without thinking that everybody is looking at them and that kind of stuff. And it does inform them a lot about that kind of thing. And so I would encourage you to not invoke this policy. The obscenity law is already in place. If I could purchase something that was obscene, it's not a possibility. I have been assured that by a number of lawyers, because I have investigated what he's going to take me to jail. That's why it's not being investigated. And please fill all 11 spots.
Our next speaker is Baggett is the last name.
Jason?
Thank you.
Hi, so Jason Baggett at 1013 Whitley Place in Hendersonville. I'm glad to hear that the majority of speakers up here tonight have given a thoughtful request to not implement this policy. It's a poorly written policy. It comes across like someone did some Googling and copy and pasting. I don't think that there's been any thought into how to actually implement the policy. Furthermore, like other speakers, I'm concerned about why qualified candidates who submitted applications to the board were not even considered or contacted. Heard people say that this is not a First Amendment issue. If this is not a First Amendment issue, what is? This is a slippery slope. Not long ago, people that are pushing for this control over what we read were saying, just not in school libraries, you can still get it at the public library. And now here we are talking about taking things out of the public library. And I don't want to be here in this meeting a year from now trying to make the case for why I'm allowed to keep books in my own house. Anecdotally, I attended an event hosted by a member of this board about a year ago. It was a Save Our Schools event, and it was alarming. It felt like a prelude to Handmaid's Tale. This obsession and mischaracterization of excerpts of literature as explicit sex acts speaks more to the people making the claims than it does the content itself. It reminds me of the satanic panic of the 1980s, which we can look back at and laugh. Small government? This is not small government. You think you know better than parents? You don't. Whatever the motivation, it is not the well-being of children, and it's certainly not the principles of which this country was founded on. If you're interested in that, there are plenty of authoritarian theocracies where you'll fit in just fine. Thanks.
Lauren Pugh. Does anybody know she have to leave? Okay. We will move on to the next one, and then if she comes back in, we'll give her an opportunity. The next speaker, Sarah Squires.
Hello, my name is Sarah Squires, and I live at 134 Chesapeake Harbor Boulevard in Hendersonville. I'm a library card holder, and I'm a chair of an organization called Right to Read Sumner. But I'm here today to speak to you as a Sumner County taxpayer. You know, when we were in this meeting the last time, I had to talk about this time. It's highly ironic to me that so many people get up here and misrepresent the words of Jesus to gaslight you into stifling free speech. It's ironic because in the millstone passage, Jesus notes to get into heaven, his children, his followers, should become like children, meaning having a childlike trust and belief in God. And he warns whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me, his followers, not literal children, to stumble, it would be better for him to have a heavy millstone hung around his neck. And yet, people who get up here and use that passage to talk about books are misrepresenting his words. They're doing exactly what he told you not to do. But in the spirit of the Constitution, which is the real subject of the day, I will leave my faith out of it. There were three things that our founding fathers held above all else, and so they put them in the First Amendment. It was the establishment of religion, or the prohibiting free exercise thereof, the abridging of the freedom of speech or the press, and the right of people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Well, I have a few grievances. The material challenge policy guidelines that you have outlined are in direct conflict with the Public Library Service Agreement from this state. The guidelines from the state say that the collection policy must include a provision that allows parties to dispute the library's age-appropriate designation on materials. It does not say that the policy should dictate exclusion or inclusion. It says it should dictate where we put them based on age appropriateness. The policy must define who can challenge. It must define how the challenge can be initiated. It defines how the results of the challenge must be disclosed in the library minutes. It does not say that this board is the arbitrator of the challenge. It doesn't say that. And yet this is what this policy does. It allows you to decide what books stay in our libraries or leave our libraries. That's not what the state says should happen. It also brings up SIPA, which in that case was determined to be about the internet or visual representations, not the written word. There's a Supreme Court case there is a federal case in Arkansas where an Arkansas law was just determined to be unconstitutional. And there were 5 or so Supreme Court cases. I'm going to read one line. The government's interest in protecting the speech addressed to adults does not justify an unnecessary broad suppression. The law would permit, if not encourage, library committees or local government bodies to make censorship decisions based on your personal viewpoint, which would violate the First Amendment.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Lindsay Dawes.
Hello.
collection policy for many different reasons. They've already been said tonight. No, I won't repeat all of them, but my main point and my question is what is next? I'm an educator in this county and have watched with horror what's been happening at the school board meetings. At those meetings, whenever a book was next on the chopping block to be banned, the common refrain was, oh, this just needs to be in the public library. People can still get it in the public library. It's not banning if it's in the public library. Here we are, as someone has already said. So what do we call this now? Is it book banning yet? When do we cross that threshold of book banning? And I ask you again, what is next? Because it's not going to stop here. My English 1 classes have been reading The Book Thief as our class novel for the past couple of years, and my, is that book timely for what is happening in the U.S. today. If you don't know the story, the book takes place during World War II and follows a girl named Liesel whose adopted family hides a Jewish name. Liesel learns to read and finds out the power of words. That's a very short summary, but you get the idea. I always start our novel unit with some historical background because context is very important when you're reading the book. The kids do some research, we talk about the rise of fascism, and what always stands out to me is how it began. It didn't start with the gas chambers. It started with this. It started with censoring art, literature, stuff that makes people think. Once we limit what people read, we can limit what people think, then we can limit people. I do not want a library board with members handpicked by a fringe political group in our county to dictate what books are available in our public libraries. Don't like the books? Don't read them. You don't want your kids to read books? Don't let them read them. It really is that simple. Stop trampling on our First Amendment rights to further whatever hate-filled agenda that you have. To put it simply, don't be a fascist. Please trust our professional librarians, and please do not pass this collection policy. Thank you.
The next speaker is Holly Cruz.
Hello, Holly Cruz, 3275 Parksville, in Stallion Springs. Thank you all for allowing me time to address you today. I'm here to ask you that you do not pass the collection policy currently as written. I am the mother of 2 young girls who frequent our public library multiple times a month. When we attend events, we are greeted by librarians who know us by name, who ask my daughters how their recent games went, and then quickly jump to offering to help them pick a book. Our librarians know that Hazel has started selecting some books from the young adult section, but will still come into the children's library to browse the newest books. They know it's hit or miss with Rosie, and whether she will be in the mood to pick out a book, or if she would rather just do the scavenger hunt, or run up and down the stairs and look for her former school librarian, or follow along behind her big sister as she pores over her choices. Sometimes we come in and they have recommendations already ready. Sometimes they have a list, because they thought about my daughters after we left the library, and they have a book that they want to recommend for her. Their faces light up with excitement every time my daughters come in to select a book. They are excited to read new stories in a favorite series, excited to see a book with a character that looks like them, excited to experience a world completely different from theirs. Going to the library is always a weekend request for my girls, and I hope as they get older that their love for the library continues. As they get older and their interests change, and they turn into curious teenagers, I hope that they always still find the library as a safe place to learn to read, and read to learn, even if that book or topic might make some uncomfortable. And if my girls show interest in reading books that reference sex, sexuality, and the human body, we, as a family, will make that decision and will help guide them, and we'll also reach out to our professional librarians for their assistance. I hope the librarians who we trust now to assist in picking books that are age appropriate will continue to feel comfortable helping parents like me select books for our children. I will continue to engage in conversations with my daughters about real topics, hard topics, and uncomfortable topics, because that is my job as mom. as people around the county have targeted books in both our public school libraries and now our public libraries, and create a narrative that libraries are a dangerous place for children, I hope here locally our librarians are reminded how thankful we are for them. We thank you for creating a space that my children yearn to come to, a safe place where they can be loud, ride up and down the elevator, explore, and choose books that they love. We thank you and we appreciate you. And to our board members who haven't made the effort to get to know our librarians and see that joy and love, I encourage you to do so.
Thank you. Did Lauren Pugh ever come in? Lauren Pugh. Is there anyone else that would like to speak that did not sign up? We want everyone to have a chance. Okay. If not, this closes the public recognition part of our meeting, and we'll continue on with the agenda.
Yes. 10 minutes, very quickly, 5 minutes. 5 minutes, just straight there and straight back. Don't talk to anybody in the hall and don't break lunch. Yes, thank you.